Hey, welcome in. I'm Rita, and this is the story I'm telling myself. If you've ever felt like you're standing in your own way, you are not alone. Let's get into it. Hello, everyone. Happy Tuesday. If you are joining us live, we are so glad to have you with us today on the Story I'm Telling Myself podcast. Hop into the comments, say hello, and welcome our guest, Robyn Graham. Robyn, welcome to the show. I'm so happy to have you today.
Hi, Rita. I'm excited to be here with you and honored too for the opportunity.
Well, in 2022, we both launched our first books, and I had the opportunity that year or the following year to come onto your podcast. So it was a no-brainer that I knew I needed to have you on mine and reciprocate that to you. But here, let's do the nice things. And again, if you're in the comments, say hello to Robyn. Robyn, tell everybody who you are so they can get to know you a little bit.
Sure, absolutely. So my name is Robyn Graham. I have a doctorate in pharmacy by degree, and I am now a certified neuroscience coach, and I just attained my ACC credentials through ICF. So right now, drawing on neuroscience and scripture, I help people break through anxiety to feel calm, confident, and content. I work especially with women who are in leadership, but I also have a few men that I work with as well. And most of my clients are parents. So we often experience emotional chaos related to anxiety, whether it's us as adults or our children. And so I help parents, families, people in leadership navigate all of that so that they can have a thriving experience, both in life as well as career.
Thriving is a word that you and I both love because it's important. It's a really important idea. This idea that we are allowed to thrive, which means that we are at our optimum, bringing our fullest selves every day into our lives. And we're going to talk about that more and how anxiety gets in the way with that. The Robyn Graham, and it's Robyn with a Y, therobyngraham.com is how you're going to connect with Robyn. It's going to give you all of her socials, everything that you're going to want. Therobyngraham.com is how you're going to reach out to her. Hey, Sharon is with us this morning. Hey, Sharon, so glad to have you. Sharon was a guest from season 1 and a good friend of mine and of the show. So happy to have you with us. Again, if you're here, you are part of the show. Ask your questions, make your comments, say hello. We love to see you participating in the show, so please join us. So as I mentioned, Robyn and I were both new authors in 2022. Robyn, you wrote a book about your own personal experience with anxiety. Mm-hmm. And you thought that this was the healing event of your life, that in writing this book, that you had taken the steps that you needed to release this, only to find out that maybe that was a story you were telling yourself. Why don't you walk our listeners into your life with anxiety?
Sure. So I guess one of my first memories is being about 6 years old, and the person came to pick me up for carpool to take me to school, and I couldn't get in the car. I was sitting on the front porch, my stomach hurt, and I was just crying. I didn't want to go. And that was an indication back then that there was a component of anxiety. But my parents didn't know what that was, and it's no fault of theirs. People were not talking about anxiety, and the doctors couldn't find anything wrong with my stomach. It just hurt. To this day, that is how anxiety manifests in my body, is I have this very distinct feeling in my stomach. So long story short, and I don't want to bore everyone with my entire journey, and they can find all of that in the book. But what I have discovered is when I had my own children and anxiety started to surface for them, I thought, I have to break this cycle. We cannot continue down this path. And I don't want them to struggle the way I struggled for so many years. And at that point, I also felt like this is an opportunity to share my journey with other teen girls, especially at the time, to help them navigate anxiety. The rate of suicide was increasing, addiction is increasing. There's so many things that can happen to these young girls if they don't understand anxiety, as well as if their parents don't understand. No one can just get over anxiety. It's crucial that there's a team effort, and it's crucial that we take action to move past it, to navigate it, to actually work through it. And so that was kind of my motivation behind writing the book. And as I was writing, I was shocked to discover that, wow, getting all of this out of me, out of my body, out of my mind was very healing. However, I think we are all created. We are like onions, and we may think that we've done the work and we have healed, but every now and then God peels back another layer and shows us another little area where maybe it's forgiveness that we aren't giving and we're holding on to, and that bubbles up anxiety. Maybe it's a past trauma that we didn't realize was actually a trauma. We all perceive things in our lives based on our past experiences and then construct what that means to us. And so things will surface over time, and we're very complex individuals, and we are layered. So yeah. So
Well, and we are humans, which means we have to make sense of the world around us. So this is our natural order of things as humans, is to write these stories inside of our own heads that help us make sense of the world and of what is happening to us. Sakata, thank you for joining us. I hope I'm saying your name appropriately. So happy to have you in the comments with us. So this idea that we have layers, and that in trying to make sense of all of these things, that we develop this narrative that lives inside of us. Right. And so often what I learned through the positive intelligence work that I did with Shazad is that it's just our way of self-protection. It is the ego trying to protect us, right? To tell us that this is the safest path, even if it's not exactly accurate or applied appropriately. And so we have this dynamic that is going on where we have this complexity of ourselves, but our mind is trying to distill it into the simplest frameworks of protection that it can. And so for you, as you were sort of uncovering the source of anxiety that you were experiencing, what did you start to notice about those layers and those little hidden stories that were playing on repeat in your head that were attempting to protect you, but were also misdirecting you?
Yeah, I love this. So I think at the root of it is that our brains do not understand what is fact versus fiction. And the way the brain works, which is so miraculous, really. I mean, we are able to change those neural pathways. They're constantly growing. Our brains are constantly developing. We don't, we say, oh, our brains stop, they're fully developed at 25. Well, now they're saying 25 to 30, especially in males. However, they actually never stop growing and changing because those neural pathways are created to, we can rewire them, right? And those neurons, those neural pathways that fire together, so to speak. And so, when we think about that, we often believe the lies that our brain is telling us, these stories that our brain has made up based on past experiences. So, for example, if you were experienced emotional neglect as a child, you may not feel like you are worthy of being heard, worthy of being respected, worthy of achieving success. You may feel that, because you failed in one area, that your entire life is a failure. But those are all stories we tell ourselves based on past experiences. We construct these perceptions. But the reality is that when we actually focus on our mind, and this was the biggest learning curve for me with all of the neuroscience. One, it's the nervous system and how it works. And two, it's that our mind is actually part of our soul, and our mind controls our brain. Our brain doesn't control our mind. And so when you think of it the opposite way, you're able to start recognizing that, wow, I'm actually worthy. I'm actually truly a cherished individual. And, whether you have faith or you don't have faith, for me, it's always been my faith that has been a concrete building block for me to be able to grow and to overcome. But the reality is that scientifically and scripturally, that it's equal. Like we have proof on both sides of that fence as to how the brain and the mind work together, and we can renew our mind. Therefore, we can heal our brain. So we don't have to stay stuck in past experiences, past traumas, past hurt, past pain. We can actually heal and grow and transform our mind and therefore our brain to think more positively and more healthy. The other thing that I would say was an immense impact in my life was practicing gratitude. My mother years ago told us, every night before you go to bed, write down 3 things you're grateful for. I adopted this habit, or this regimen, when I was in college. And then there were years where maybe I let it go or whatever. But a journaling practice can be immensely helpful when you're navigating any sort of anxiety, pain, trauma, anything, depression. To be able to get those thoughts, those negative beliefs onto a piece of paper and out of your mind. And when you add gratitude to that, we're actually shifting the way our brain is working. We're able to be more in the prefrontal cortex of our brain, which is then going to allow us to function more highly, use our executive functioning, that brilliant center of our brain, to make better decisions and to tap into our creativity. And the more we do that, the more our confidence grows to be able to trust ourselves and move forward versus staying stuck in this place of, I can't do it, I'm afraid. And, the anxiety.
What a great simple tip. So tip number 1 from this episode is don't blow it off. Stick with that gratitude practice. You've heard this from so many different places, but now you're getting the science you may not have heard before about how you are activating areas of your brain that really give you access to creativity, into executive functioning, which allows you to be in motion in meaningful and impactful ways. So I want to go back to something else that you said before we get deeper into the gratitude practice. And that is this piece around these stories that are happening, and they form at such a young age. I mean, that's the other thing that when we are younger, when we are our younger selves, we don't have the capacity yet to really know how to handle big emotions and events that come our way. And so our body is creating these protectionistic things. And the 3 that really imprint strongly on all of us are the fear of rejection, the fear of shame, and the fear of being unworthy. And you shared with me in our conversation preparing for this, that at one point in time, you had a story that you were telling yourself about your worthiness to claim your own hurt and need to heal, because you were looking at other people's stories and saying, well, this is nothing. Like, have nothing. Would you tell our listeners a little bit about that experience? Because I think this is something that all of us who don't have significant trauma, like the loss of a parent, sexual abuse, things like that, may be falling into.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to preface this by saying, so our nervous systems are formed when we are in our mother's womb, right? But even if our grandmothers experienced some sort of pain, trauma, negative experience, high levels of stress and anxiety, and their nervous system was triggered and in fight, flight, freeze, fawn, while they were pregnant with your mother, that affects your development as a human being. And so when we are young, we don't recognize how to handle situations. And oftentimes, if we have not done the healing work from past experiences, or even the fact that our nervous systems have not developed the way, are not as healthy as, let's say, they didn't have a healthy development, then we're going to be more often in fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And so we develop these patterns and these behaviors based on the fact that our nervous system is not regulated. When you think about experiencing life, and for me, I didn't experience these, I experienced bad things per se, like, the loss of grandparents, things like that. I was a highly sensitive child and my nervous system was not regulated. So I took all of that to heart. That all had an imprint on who I was and an imprint on my nervous system. There was dysfunction in our home in terms of a lot of overreacting versus responding, a lot of unknown responses based on different situations. And so those things all impacted my nervous system development and how I approached life. But what's so interesting is that I didn't see any of the things that I had experienced as being trauma, as being really bad, because I knew people who had experienced things that were much worse. And I discounted it. And I thought, well, I really shouldn't feel like there's anything wrong with my life. I should just be grateful that I have the life I have. And I always was grateful, but there was always this underlying, just not a feeling of being confident, worthy, self-esteem lacked, self-trust lacked, all of those things, because I had never learned to process those things in a healthy way and to regulate my nervous system. So once I was able to establish this nervous system regulation and be able to pause before I responded, then I could respond with grace, right? But prior to that, it was a lot more overreacting because my nervous system wasn't regulated. And when you don't recognize that you need to heal, shame bubbles up, more hurt bubbles up, more anxiety bubbles up. And so you just develop these coping mechanisms, but you never heal to the point where you can experience life in a calm, content, confident way.
Yeah, you described it to me as your nervous system was on fire.
Yeah. Yeah, and I feel like it was. And when I say that, it sounds a little exaggerated, but when I say that, I spent a lot of time in fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And fawn is basically people pleasing. So, if you experience certain things in life and your nervous system isn't regulated, you don't have the tools to regulate your nervous system, you're always going to be in fight or flight. You're always going to be trying to control your environment, control the outcomes. And I'm sure a lot of people listening are going to relate to this. I think a lot of us who are high achievers and who are in leadership roles experience this on a regular basis. And sometimes that can serve us very well. But over time, spending so much time in fight or flight, or flight, or, running away from things because there could be a risk of failure, or, trying to be perfect all the time, trying to please other people in order to keep calm. And a lot of times, if that's the environment that you have been in as a child, all of that carries forward into your adult years. So when you have spent your entire life in these, trying to protect yourself, trying to control everything, trying to please everyone, trying to make sure everything around you and everything you do is perfect, your nervous system is on fire. It is always on, and that ends up being exhausted. And that is why a lot of people experience burnout, because they're not pausing. They're not allowing themselves to reset. When we're dysregulated, we're not sleeping well. There's so many things that just are preventing us from being able to reset and then start over the next day. And yeah, so it's just this constant bubbling of flames,
Right,
keeping
right.
you activated and on high alert, which is not healthy.
Lisa and Leslie, thank you for joining us. Yeah, Sharon agrees that this is a great way to describe what many people are experiencing and the connection then to burnout. And I love that you're adding the fawn piece, because I know in my own home, growing up as a child, um, my parents didn't fight a lot, but they didn't really get along either. There was a lot of sort of staying in their corners, a little bit of distancing. And when they did fight, they fought over the same things all the time. So there was never any real resolution. And so in my relationship with my own husband, I had to recognize at certain points that I needed to trust that we could argue and still love one another, that it wouldn't result in rejection, that it didn't question my worthiness. But it was a retraining of my thinking, because what had been sort of imparted to me almost passively in watching what was happening with my parents was that conflict was something that never resolved anything, and if anything only made things worse and created more distance. And I think that so many leaders fall into this trap, even in leading their own teams. I speak a lot to people about the importance of allowing and inviting and increasing the amount of disagreement, the amount of opportunity for people to say no. No, I'm not there yet, because that is the power of creativity, of innovation, of best thinking rising up. But again, conditioned in my own home to the exact opposite message of that.
And when you grow up in an environment where there's a lot of overreacting and there is a lot of conflict, then you want to avoid conflict.
Yes.
And so, like for me, when I was in corporate, I remember the first time I had to lay someone off or fire someone, and I was physically sick for days, because that conflict, that having to address that, was just debilitating. And so, those are skills that you have to learn. And I think that's where also, when you can regulate your nervous system and you can break through anxiety and actually see life for what it is, you can develop really healthy communication skills. And you can accept that someone may not agree with you, and you can approach things with the word and instead of but. You can say yet instead of never. There's so many ways that you can address this to actually train your brain to see the positive versus being stuck in the negative of, it's never going to work out. Well, it hasn't worked out yet, and there's hope that it will. You can always take that next step, the next right step.
So we titled this episode, "Do You Need to Heal?" And of course, your perspective, Robyn, is yes. The answer to that question is yes, unequivocally, yes. So thank you, Gary. I'm glad Gary's joining us from the UK, and he said that when he's at rest, he achieves so much more, and I find the same to be true. When I even stepping out last week, I spent last week with my girlfriend in Florida at her home, and I worked every day, but I was out of my normal. And so the kind of work that I could do, the deep thinking work that I was able to do, was completely different, because I sort of removed myself from all the normal stimulus. There are lots of layers to what it means to rest as well. But Robyn, the answer for all of us is yes, we need to heal. So what are some entry points that you would offer to our listeners about how to start to pull at the layers of that onion a little bit? What might they notice in themselves? What might be a good first step that they could take?
Sure. So awareness is key, right? Because if you're not aware that something's off, you don't recognize that you need to heal, or, maybe heal is kind of sounds dramatic to someone, but there's always an opportunity for growth. What areas do you need to growth? And I think if you're struggling with relationships, that's one very big indicator, whether it's a partner, a spouse, your children, your team at work. There's there's opportunity there for
Yeah, if
new
there's
growth
that
and
person
healing.
at work that plucks your last nerve, that just set your teeth on it, and you're just like, I can't stand to be around this person. I don't. This is not a normal thing.
No,
This is
no.
this is that alarm bell. You might get along with everybody else in your team, but if you're at a place where you can allow one person to dysregulate your system that much, this is a sign that
Mm-hmm.
you have some
Yeah.
of this healing work to do.
100%. If you feel like you are just angry more often than you are calm or content, if you find yourself overreacting when, maybe you're cooking dinner and your child brings you something just to discuss with you and you kind of lose it because your brain is going through every scenario that you had at work that day, and all these what if questions are coming up, and the anxiety, the stress is just bubbling, your shoulders are up to your ears, and someone asks you a question and you just snap, what do you want now? That's an indication that your nervous system is on high alert. If you're overreacting versus responding gracefully, I like to say. There's a lot of physical signs and symptoms that one can be in a state of anxiety or may need healing as well. I mean, if you're having chronic pain, or if you're having, maybe you've got asymmetric pain, maybe you're all of a sudden your right knee hurts and then your left elbow hurts, or, something like that, that's an indication that there's something going on within your mind, body, spirit connection that needs a little bit of work. If you're not sleeping well at night, our bodies need 8 hours of sleep at night. We need to have that time to decompress, reset, and then start the next day fresh. So if you're not sleeping well, what are your behavioral patterns before you go to bed? Do you feel like you're doing all these things and very stressed going to bed? Because that is not helpful. Oftentimes people may have a racing heart rate. I mentioned like that anger. If there is an area in your life, someone who you have not forgiven, maybe yourself, that is an indication that there's some work to do, because unforgiveness is going to increase anxiety. It's going to dysregulate the nervous system. And we all have past experiences that maybe we're holding on to and we haven't released. And if that's the case, then there's an opportunity to do some work there.
When you were talking about your child coming into your cooking dinner, I had this flashback. When my kids were younger, especially, that was often a trigger point for me, was when I was trying to cook dinner and do all the things, because the story that I told myself was that, I had this responsibility to provide healthy, nutritious meals for my family. It was something that I wanted to do. And, but inevitably that would be when my kids would come to me with, needing 1,000 things or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I finally, it took me a really long time of really trying to be like, because I could just feel the tension, the anxiousness. I would get short tempered with them.
Mm-hmm.
I could feel it in my body. And I thought, what is this about? It took me a long time to sit with that question. What is this about? And I realized that the story that I was telling myself was that as the mom, it was my job to make the family life perfect for everyone.
There's that word, perfect.
Yes. It was my job so in that moment when I'm trying to get, because, it's not a small feat to bring dinner together and not burn things and have everything ready on time, and all of that takes a certain amount of time and attention. So that, and then couple that with then my kids are asking things of me and I don't want to disappoint them. I want to be there for them. Right. I want to deliver for them. And instead of being conscious enough to say, honey, I want to help you, but now is not the right time, I just felt like I had to immediately respond, right? And juggle all the balls at the same time. And then I felt overwhelmed, right? And so I think that it can be in the smallest, sneakiest of ways that this happens to all of us. But it's the reason it's the name of the podcast. It all comes down to What is the underlying story that's playing in your head that you've been telling yourself forever that you are perpetuating, that is contributing to this dysregulation trap that you're caught in?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And, as you were talking, I'm like, yeah. And there's the load of laundry that has to be switched over. And there's the bathroom that has to be cleaned. And then there's the homework that has to be done. I mean, it's
and the dog that has to be walked and fed
exactly. And out,
brushed
it's banging on the door at the same time. I mean, it's always like a volcano erupting. Everything happens at the same time. And I think that's, we, especially as women, we think that we have to multitask, and we think we can multitask. We cannot multitask. Our brain does not multitask. And that's why that feeling of anxiety bubbles up so much, because we're not meant to be doing 10 things at one time, and we cannot do all of them well. And here we are pressuring ourselves to make sure all of them are done perfectly, and it's just not possible. So, if you're experiencing that, and if you're living in a state of constant need of control, constant need of people pleasing, constant need of perfection, those are huge indicators. And those are the three biggest, I think, that you can take away, that if that is the way you're living your life, eventually that's going to crash. We cannot keep that up long term. And so those are huge indicators that.
And can we say, and I know you used to practice as a business coach, which is not your focus any longer, Robyn, but this is exactly the spot that every manager feels stuck in right now, which is why manager burnout is at an all-time high, right? Yeah. They're chasing perfectionism in terms of, they want to please their boss. They want to please the people that report to them. And then what was the third one you gave?
People pleasing, perfectionism, and control.
And control. And then they're trying to control things, many things that aren't even within their control. They're trying to control simultaneously. So look, if you're a people leader and chances are very, very high that you are operating in this highly that you're on fire every day. There's a reason you're going home exhausted. Yeah. There is a reason that you are questioning whether or not you can continue. There's a reason young people are like, yeah, you know what? For that $2 more an hour, you want to give me to be the supervisor of the team? Yeah, thanks, no thanks. Like they have caught on to this. And they know, right? They understand this wellness impact. I mean, your well-being and the well-being of your team is very much predicated on to what extent those three things are operating continuously within your organization culture. That's a really easy one to diagnose.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it sounds simple. And oftentimes we don't recognize that that's the state we're in until all of a sudden I'm crashing and I don't know why. And it's like, but this is where that awareness comes into play. We really have to be aware of what is going on. What is the mind-body connection? I mean, we are so intricately made. And so if you're feeling things in your body, it's time to pause and say, gosh, what is going on in my life? Like, what are the things and the interactions and the people and the dealings that I'm experiencing, and really evaluating like which ones are working and which ones aren't. And what am I doing where I am trying to control everything in my environment, and make a list of what those things are, and then really look at, well, is this even realistic? I can't do that. But then at the same time, if you're telling yourself, I'm just not worthy, or, any type of negative self-talk, I'm fat, or I'm ugly, or I don't have any clothes to wear, whatever it is you're talking to yourself, saying to yourself, it's important to evaluate that too. And this is where that, again, awareness is key, where you can actually say, okay, would someone that I know, love, and trust actually be saying the same thing about me? Does anybody else believe this? Or is this a lie that I am telling myself? Because again, our brains don't decipher, they don't discern between what's true and what's false. And so we absolutely have to be aware of where there is truth and where there's not truth. And then we have to dissect that and make sure that we are making changes, actually shifting what we're thinking, so that we can help our brain heal, grow new neural pathways than to be more on track versus being stuck like a Ferris wheel in this negative cycle, this negative thought loop that's going to hold us back, keep us stuck, and not allow us to thrive and experience life the way it's meant to be.
Yes, thank you, Sharon, for jumping in. That push for controlling things, for reaching perfectionism, all of those things come at real cost to our minds, our bodies, and our spirits. For certain, if you are looking at your life, I think the other thing that Robyn touched on but didn't name specifically that I will say out loud is, if you're finding that you don't have the energy mentally or physically or emotionally to do things that you used to do, this is a very clear siren call that you need to check yourself and identify where you are falling trap to one of these internal scripts that is really getting pathological for you, meaning is causing harm to your body. Robyn, we only have a few minutes left in the episode. What final thoughts or words of wisdom would you like to share with our listeners?
I will say a couple of different things. One, anxiety does not define you. Two, practice gratitude. Start there. And three, if you are experiencing significant levels of anxiety, don't think that there is shame in getting help. The best thing you can do for yourself is seek help from a medical professional or a therapist, psychologist, psychiatrist. Don't let this build, because the longer you go in this state of nervous system dysregulation, not feeling, really beating yourself up and feeling stuck, the worse it's going to be and the harder it is to dig yourself out of that. So I just encourage everyone, if you're experiencing that, get the help you need. If you have been in therapy for a long period of time and you feel like, gosh, I'm so tired of hashing out the past, I just want to move on from this, but I don't feel healed yet, or I don't feel ready, then consider coaching, because coaching takes you from the present to the future, whereas therapy brings you from the past to the present. And so if you feel like you're ready for real growth and real forward movement, consider coaching. But there are so many resources. And now, because of the online space, one is, I would say, give yourself a break from social media. Eliminate the comparison and the temptation to compare, right? And the imposter syndrome, like just remove that for a while. Give yourself time to reset and refocus that energy on yourself versus what's going on in the world around you. And also, with all of the media that we're getting, and pharmaceuticals are bad and this, that, and the other. Listen, some brains need a little extra help to heal. So if you are really struggling, do not discount the help from a medication that could help you be able to focus on therapy or move yourself forward in coaching. So that's it. I think that's it.
I think those are wonderful tips. So happy that you were able to jump in and say hello, Jackie. So if you want to follow up with Robyn, I'm putting once again her website, the Robyn with a Y, ROBYN, Graham with an H, GRAHAM.com is where you will find her. TheRobynGraham.com. Come back next week on Tuesday again for our next live. My friend Monica is joining us from the UK. We're going to talk about community building. You are going to love her energy. And for those of you that love this show, it'll be out on the podcast platforms Thursday. Make sure that you go out there and share it with a friend or two and let them hear Robyn's words of wisdom. Robyn, it has been tremendously helpful having this conversation available to everyone today. Thank you for sharing your journey and for sharing all of the wisdom that you have gained in your own studies. And we will see everybody back here next Tuesday again at 11:30. Thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful day. Bye. Thanks for joining us. If you love this episode, leave us those 5 stars and be sure to share this with a friend. And if you didn't, don't worry about it. See you back here next week.